All right. So ladies, gentlemen, thank you for joining me this evening. I hope everyone had a great little dinner. No one too exhausted from the food, have the itis. I'm sure everyone loves those afternoons meetings that get scheduled that you get to pass out on. At least that's my nap time. Either way, my name is Ken Monty. I am here to talk to you about home labs. I've brought a couple of them here for you today. I've got a couple examples as well. We're gonna have fun, all right? So, you know something's official whenever it has a children's book, right? Really? Because if you don't tell them what it is, then they're gonna go around saying Skynet, Skynet. That's their only other frame of reference, right?
Chelsea. She looks just like Chelsea.
Yes, she does. But throughout here, by the way, I'll also try to credit a lot of these artists, minus the obvious ones like everyone knows SpongeBob, but I have credited the sources. A lot of these pictures are not mine, some of them are, but I do not have that much equipment, all right? But moving on, that was probably one of the last few child-friendly slides in this deck. Not saying it's going to get extravagant, but there will probably be a couple F-bombs dropped, and some memes, lots of memes, vagrant memes, sprinkled throughout this thing. So if you are of a sensitive constitution, I suggest seeking an adult immediately. So, otherwise, I've also got swag. What's that mean? Here, I have 3 bags. Pretty swanky bags. Inside, you'll find stickers, everyone loves stickers, and a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus. Yeah, right? I thought about dropping some USB card drives in there because everyone can use them, and I got a bunch for cheap, but then I realized this is probably the wrong crowd to give them to. So, history, right? How do you get them? With the fun. I go around giving workshops, presentations a lot, so sometimes it's a lot of me just talking. I'm going to break this up into more of a dialogue, all right? So throughout this presentation, there are going to be some questions, game show style questions. For the most part, just say it with your chest, speak out. We're in a pretty small enough room. I'm hard at hearing, but I think I can handle it. With that, the questions you answer, I'll take down a little point. So come up here, tell me your handle, we'll make a little mark of it. There are a bunch of questions, a bunch of points you can get. Top 3 places, get one of these bags, right? Outside of that, you get the question right, you get a point. You get it wrong, you get a point. So it's kind of like whose line is it anyway? Right? Now, in doing so, your reward for participation is not just your shot at swag and a little compute, right? We've also got a little tasty beverage over here because I went to Freaknik probably 10 years ago, and one of my favorite parts about it was DC's Drunken Rant, if you guys remember, right? So,
and don't forget the glory. There has to be glory.
There is plenty of glory, and maybe even some alien conspiracies later, right? Now, outside of that, I want to get everybody on a nice little level this evening as well, so whenever you do answer a question, right or wrong, because again, the points don't matter, come up here and grab a cup. There is a hot buttered rum beverage in here, something for the season, something to sit warm and on your belly after this delicious dinner everyone's had, all right? So again, don't be shy. Raise your hand though before everyone starts shouting it out, all right? Because I did tell you to say it with your chest, but it might get a little shouting match. And I am the loudest person here, trust me on that, even without this thing. All right, so moving on, who am I? Who is this weirdo sitting up here and jibber jab and chalk and jive, right? I am a local, and I've been born and raised here for most of my life. I've been thankful and lucky enough to travel and see a bunch of different culture and experience all sorts of different things. I grew up in the 90s. I had technology that was a little bit older than my generation, though. I actually started on equipment that made a nice clunk when you closed that 5.5-inch floppy drive. My original PC was a POS, which means a lot of things at the same time for that thing, that booted DOS off of a floppy, and the only other thing I had was Chessmaster and QBasic. So at an early age of 6, I was trying to figure out how to go to and print things, right? Rudimentary stuff, but I'm actually very grateful for it because it taught me some really foundational things, right? No one sets IRQ settings anymore. You see it in your BIOS and you ignore it, right? No one's moving around dip switches or moving little pins on anything. Cool, but again, something I think, blessed for. I had a pretty heavy hand in web development. I started in the glory days of front page and cold fusion hell. I do get some flashbacks from that WYSIWYG. Otherwise, I started with, comically enough, in the security realm, front page exploits, because again, that was right around the same sort of time, right? I did some weird things here and there. I built a game console, an x86 game console with some friends. It was like a 700 megahertz. It was based around the concept of the original Xbox. Really rudimentary. It was basically just a lame OpenGL launcher that I had emulators launched from, and then I ported a very lame version of Block Dude to an OpenGL. But either way, around the same sort of time, I also attended some of the early years of Freaknik, so I have been here. I'm not just some weirdo, so when we were playing Spot the Fed later, I'm not me, right? I actually got to rep them at a couple other conferences. Love this jazz. Pretty excited to be back here and talking. Moving on, in high school, I had some pretty interesting security run-ins. Let's just say it like that. I did some pen testing of some networks and found out that after a simple MAC address check, you had access to the network, which you could laterally move along because everyone had Samba enabled on everything. And if you were wise enough to route across the network, you could access the directory servers, which also had Samba on C and admin enabled. So a little bit later, some LM hashes cracked because they weren't even using NTLM hashes. Well, the state of Tennessee starts prosecuting me. Either way, things end up blowing over. It was great. Nothing's on my record, thankfully. But afterwards, they told me I can't touch anything. I actually had that talk of you can't bring your laptop, you can't bring a flash drive, you can't bring your cell phone, you can't touch our labs at all. And then something happened and I had to fix something for them and fix something else. And the second thing I fixed was their ID printer, at which point I got to print off a staff ID and walk around out of uniform. It was wonderful. I actually got to do some really cool stuff with that. I won't go into it here on camera though. Moving on, after high school, I did some maybe weird things, kind of here, there, and everywhere, I'd say. I ran a VPN service for a little while when that was all the rage. Had a couple other security escapades, but then I kind of fell back out of that more so as a primary source of my interests because it's a little rough for me, let's say it that much. My bravado kind of gets me in trouble here or there. So I decided to move up into the mountains. I went up to Knoxville and started doing web development full time, and that was fun, that was great, but I figured the mountains were not for me. So after that, I came back into Nashville and got into hospitality. Did a little fine dining, got to sharpen my skills in communication and engagement and sales. I can have someone sit down in front of me, generally assess what they're there for, and give them a wonderful experience with maybe a life-changing pork chop. Yeah. You guys just had dinner, but I bet you I've just made a couple of you all hungry, right? Either way, after doing that, I decided that I was having fun, I was making a lot of great money, it was great, but I was working 80 hours a week, at least, sometimes 100, because also at the same time I launched a little bit of an agriculture tech project. This agriculture tech project, we developed some fertilizer computation libraries that can compute down to the 100th part per million of every macro and micro element needed in a fertilizer from any component that you need. Does some regression to help suggest those fertilizers. Some really cool stuff, very powerful stuff. Did some automation. Did some pretty interesting hydroponic system development. And to answer your question, no, it was not just for growing weed, all right? So, I really believe, I really believe that food production is gonna be an issue, right? People are becoming more aware of their food, where it's coming from, how it's made, what it's gone through. I think the decentralization of food production with increased efficiencies and automation are going to be, it's going to be one of the biggest things that humanity faces here in the next few decades, realistically. It might be. So, right? I mean, we can desalinate, we can generate power, we can hopefully heal some damage to the planet, but we've got to feed some people too, right? So I hope we can get it done. Hopefully adding some progress to that as well. So one thing I'll point out, why is there carpet up here? You can do some really cool stuff and make a little water filter if you're out in the middle of nowhere and only find stuff along a creek to make something out of, right? And if you're wondering, cotton candy is the best filter. Carpet. Now, in recent years, I've been doing some consulting work. I jumped back into tech because I decided not to work all those hours doing all that stuff. Started doing some consulting work for Cisco, and that was pretty good stuff. We did some evangelical work for some services, and from there I moved on to Red Hat, where I was one of their platform solution architects. I got to support a sales team of 20 sales representatives. It was really rewarding. I missed them greatly. One of the things I did there, actually, that kind of ties into this presentation, was I built a little lab, right? Old gear, nothing really crazy, but I brought in a little rack, I set it up, I set up some servers and switches and some basic equipment to visualize, to show them some of these concepts that I take for granted. Because we all know what a CPU socket is and how cores relate to it, but the average salesman does not. So I was able to bolster their enthusiasm and also, like every businessman likes to hear, increase the bottom line. Some really cool things to see about the effect of getting them to feel and touch a heat sink, right? Either way, now I work for a company called Fierce Software, right? Fierce Software is a value-added reseller that in the industry is kind of demoted to the term paper pushers. We are not that, all right? We put on workshops, we put on webinars, demos, all sorts of stuff. We specialize in the public sector and focus on secure platforms, DevOps, and big data, and data analytics. I get to do some really cool things with some industry-leading giants, and I gotta say I'm blessed. Now, at Fierce, I am the lead solution architect. If you guys don't know what a solution architect is, it's something that's kind of come up in the last maybe decade, right? When I was growing up, this wasn't actually a thing. I imagined I wanted to do stuff with computers and things, but not quite like this. And this is actually pretty close to a dream job. So a solution architect is this. Imagine you want to build a deck, right? You know, you need some wood, some nails, this, that, and the other. You go to Home Depot, you find a guy in an orange apron, and you go, hey, Mr. Apron Guy, I want to build a deck. What do I need? And then you start talking, and he goes, yeah, okay, cool. You got an idea, decks need wood and things, but you actually probably want screws. You actually need some brackets to mount it to, maybe some concrete footers. So he's going to take you throughout the store and gather the things you need to build this deck, and maybe guide you along the way on a higher level, helping you as best to his expertise. He might be really good in the area where you need to pick up the concrete mix and the footers and the column forms, but he might not know how to use the tools, but he does know a friend that can explain that fully, right? He'll carry you up to the checkout. Extra kind guy, maybe helps you load it into your truck and gets you moving along the way. That's essentially what a solution architect is, right? You have companies and agencies come up to us and they go, hey, we want servers. We're like, cool, what kind of servers? What kind of workloads? What are your business objectives? Let's figure this out. So as a solution architect, I get to put all of these pieces together and do this until something works. It's pretty fun, actually. So what I'm here to talk to you about today are home labs. This arguably is one of the greatest home labs of the early 90s, right? Pour a little out for Robin Williams. No, that way. All home labs don't have to look like this. I think home labs are very important. And so if you really think about it, some of the giants that we know of today started off in a garage, in a home lab, building computers, putting them together. Some of these concepts and hands-on activities that are kind of lost now in the ubiquity of technology that we have, right? So I think it's really important and really valuable to have a home lab. What is the most important part of a home lab? This is one of those question parts, right? So feel free to raise your hand and answer. All right, first off, what's most important?
Zip ties.
Zip ties, I'll take it. Come up and get a drink. Ultimately, all of these are valid answers. It depends on what you're going to be doing, right? Maybe.
Perfect timing, thank you so
There you
much.
go. If you're doing circuit design, you probably use your soldering iron a lot, but zip ties actually is probably the best answer, to be honest. But all these are valid.
What can't you do with them?
Actually, I've got some right here holding my Raspberry Pi cluster together, really.
See?
Yeah. And on the inside of that little box, I'll give that in a minute. Great. So this is also what a home lab could look like. This is a pretty decent home lab, right? It could probably use a little bit of work, but a stack of equipment, some strings of wires running to everything, and it works. Pretty cool. This is actually what a lot of people's home labs look like. I wish mine did look as organized as this.
That is a lot of fiber.
Oh, actually, that they're tiny, they're really thin Ethernet cables. They're Cat6 cables that they're really thin. They're not shielded or anything. A lot of people swear by them. Some of them can actually reach 10 gig Ethernet speeds, but don't have, they're usable, but debatable, right? Like I like my 10 gigabit Ethernet with shielding. Those do not have them. They're really thin, but they work. But they do look like single mode fiber, very close. Yeah. This could also be a home lab, right? You don't need servers. You can have some radio equipment. In fact, this is actually something I'm getting into because, you know, something, if you guys are members of the 2600, I used to be, again, I wish I were as active as I once was. If you remember 2600, Reddit, know about the history, radio is kind of where things started off, right? Signals, clocks, you learn a lot through radio, and actually nowadays it's very important in disasters especially. There was a senator that recently reached out and tried to help protect ham radio operators because during the recent hurricanes, communication infrastructure went down and the ham radio operators were the only ones able to communicate. That's some very valuable stuff, right?
There's a TCP protocol for ham radio. You can actually send packets.
There is. Didn't the Lulz group or something like that make that?
But I know it exists.
I remember that, yeah.
Oh, really?
Now you can do a lot with radio. Yeah, that's, the antenna thing is probably one of the bits that stops a lot of people, unfortunately. If you own your home and you want to build an antenna array, check with your homeowners association. If you do want to reach some other larger, farther distance radio stations, you will need to build an antenna instead of having ones off of a little radio handset like that. And if you start to attach it to your house, you might get fined.
You have to make it mobile.
If you have that problem, make it into a flagpole and they can't do dick about it.
Patriotism, I like it. Bonus glory for patriotism.
Perfect.
That's the point.
This could also be your home lab. This is a little over the top, right? This is something built into this guy's closet. He's got like 80 monitors on there, racks underneath his standing desks, everything tightly organized, thousands and thousands of dollars. This gentleman uses it to replicate his work environment, right? So at that point, he's a little bit more astute and quick whenever he needs to respond to emergencies at work or operations that he does on a day-to-day. Maybe he can use the same resources and potentially automate his job, parts of it. So we don't ever want anyone to know that we've automated our entire job, right? This is also what a home lab could look like. This is how a lot of people actually start. You should, if you ask my friends, you'll know that I had a stack of servers and a switch on one of my dining room tables for probably 3 months. It was great.
Of course, having your drink on top of the server is a little bit
Yeah, that's pretty.
taking.
Well, that's not your drink, that's a server's drink. Look, it's got a full place setting.
And
It's a hungry server.
Why is the surfer
it's
eating
got a
better than
serving warming apparatus built right into it.
True, it's a plate warmer as well.
It's a plate warmer.
Look at that. I didn't even think about that. Multi-purpose. Your home lab could do so much.
Gotta write that one
Now, you can have a rack. This might be a little bit more of an abnormal rack. This is just a standard equipment rack. This is in Europe. Their air register is in the middle of that little big metal thing. So actually they're using their servers to circulate hot air throughout their house, which I've been doing recently as in cold weather. You can actually use it. Though if you do try to venture down that route and just try to get some, ducts and tape them to the back of your servers or something and put it into your Exchange outlet box, it's not going to work out as well as you should. You need backdraft dampeners and a couple other things. So it can work, but don't try to put it into your central AC. Bad things happen. This could also be your home lab. Right? This is a little bit more of a workbench. This is geared towards music equipment production and music circuit production, but the same stuff could be used to build embedded circuits for IoT, for wearables, for all sorts of things, right? You've got power supplies, you've got oscilloscopes, you've got clock generators, and this embarrassing old Dell from 2006. Sorry, Dean. I do love Dell, though. Next question. What's the most important component of a home lab rack?
RGB.
Woo! All right, this guy.
Well, I was gonna say cooling.
Cooling. That is actually probably one of the most important parts. So go and grab yourself a drink. So LEDs do make things go fast, the red ones especially. Blinking lights are cool, but if you're in the cloud, you don't have those blinking lights. And otherwise, everyone always needs more power, right? I'm already running out of cores to use. But cooling is definitely the most important part because, again, that last guy was using his rig to heat up his house. You can have it real quick. All right, so show and tell time, right? Here up front, I've got a couple of little kits from my home lab. This first little sucker is a 7-node Raspberry Pi cluster, right? This thing cost me about $600 for the whole set, and that includes some extra storage, a lot more storage. I have a bunch of all these USB drives I wanted to give y'all that I didn't, went in here. So what this has, you plug in power to two things and it's fully contained. This bottom Raspberry Pi provides services to the rest of the stack, be that DNS, DHCP, NTP, and a few other things, repo hosts, yada yada. So I have a fully disconnected environment here. I have 3 Kubernetes clusters to run some basic applications and a little bit of a Gluster cluster to do some software-defined storage. So interesting stuff you can do here. If you go this route, something to keep in mind, this is not the same x86 system that you have in your computer. You're not going to be able to run all the same applications. You need to make sure that they are actually compiled for the ARM architecture, right? So definitely keep in mind, if you want to run enterprise software on a small cluster, like for instance, if I wanted to run Red Hat OpenShift on here, I can't because they don't have it compiled for ARM. Something to keep in mind. This little sucker is one of my first 3D printers, all right? This helped me do some prototyping for circuit design and enclosure printing. It's hooked up to a Raspberry Pi in a little corner of the room, actually on a shelf, and I can send 3D files to it to print, and it just kind of spools off. Feeds a printer on the line, and bing, bang, boom. So I have a little corner of a fabrication lab. Just got a new 3D printer. This one's all right. I'd go with something that you can upgrade though and modify. This one has a little bit too much of a constraint. All right, so this devious looking device is actually a outdoor ready and waterproof GPS NTP server. That acronym soup means geopositional system, satellites, and with GPS, I use it to figure out time, right? GPS is just time, actually, I learned.
They've stopped using the atomic clock protocol. That radio is no longer going to be transmitted due to cuts by the Trump administration. So,
Absolutely.
you're going to have to use GPS.
Yeah. So GPS is not only one of the few ways you can get it, coming up here soon especially. There are a couple like long distance FT8 radios, have some interesting time synchronicity bits that you can do, but it's not quite as accurate. This thing has it down to nanoseconds, I think maybe even smaller than that really. But it's extremely accurate, very important time in a computing environment, especially if you have something running a bunch of containers and tracking the states of those containers and tracking connections and routes to those containers. You need to make sure that everything that you're connecting, basically, is doing so properly so the health of your environment is kept up to date. Short and skinny of it, right? This thing is also a home lab. This is actually one of my first home labs. It's a little $100 laptop I got, and I threw a solid state drive in there. It screams now, right? That little sucker. Loaded VirtualBox on there, and I have an identity management lab running in VMs on this. You can do all sorts of different things, but just because you hear home lab doesn't mean you have to go out and buy something or equipment. You might already have it well within your grasp, right? All right, cool. Why? All right, why would you do this? Like, I would much rather watch Parks and Rec than listen to this guy anymore, right? I would. So, there are a lot of reasons, actually. Now, if you research online, you'll come across a lot of reasons, and I want to forewarn you against one of the ones that you'll find a bunch of advertisements about, right? There's nothing natural about it. There's nothing enhancing about it. All right, ma'am, I've got to go with you. You had your first hand.
False.
False. That is absolutely false. No matter what you hear on the internet, it will not increase anything. Though oddly enough, a cloud lab does contribute to girth. So, what can a home lab do for you? Self-improvement. Don't rest on your laurels, right? Who wants to do that? If I rested on what I first originally learned, you guys would be making fun of me because I'd be up here talking about iframes and front page, right? It's self-improvement. This industry moves too fast for most of us to keep up with. I know I can't really keep up with it. Sometimes I hear things on the news in tech industry and I just want to crawl into my bed and forget anything like this happens and exists. But things change and you need to change and keep up with it as well. So a home lab can do that very easily. So you can also have a dedicated area for test benching. Because here's the thing. Yeah, you could run some VMs on here and that might be segregated, but the problem is it's actually not too hard to escape the sandbox of VM, to be realistic about it. So if I wanted to test some viruses on my laptop, then I could, but I'd want something a little bit more ephemeral, right? You can do that with a home lab. Cool factor. RGB lights actually do make things cooler, right? This is something I want to say is a lac rack, all right? So IKEA makes those little tables. They're cardboard and wood reinforced tables, honeycomb format, and real strong and tough. 19 inches wide exactly. Perfect for rack, right? They have a longer one as well. People stack them, and they're $20.
You have changed my life.
$20. That's pretty cool. Arguably, that's cool. Also, gets you a job easier. During my interview with Fierce, I honestly believe that my lab and my work lab definitely had a contributing factor to it. I had 2 phone interviews. I never met these guys before. And these guys just thought I was awesome and liked what I did and wanted me to work for them, right? Kind of weird. I didn't believe it happened at first. I thought it's like Ashton Kutcher was going to come out of somewhere and be like, ha, you're jobless, right? But no, it's not only helped me, it's helped a lot of other people as well. It shows that you have the drive, it shows that you have the ability to learn on your own laurel, or your own volition, right? You're not just gonna do the ho-hum stuff. You might find out something cool at home and bring it into work, and that actually adds value. Maybe gets that promotion like this guy did, right? All right, so you're on board. You like it, you maybe have a couple plans, ideas. Where do you get this stuff, right?
Recycling center.
Yeah, I like that. This guy knows.
I know.
This guy home labs. Anyone Silicon Valley? Anyway, it was a good year on the server farm, but harvests aren't always this great, right? You can get it from all over the place. Usual suspects being the Bay, Zon, and the spooky list. You can actually check out Reddit. Reddit actually has some really good trading boards, great prices, and it helps another home labber out, right? Government auctions, surplus, great way to go. If you are looking for things on eBay, there's this website, LabGopher, that actually scrapes and aggregates the listings. You can narrow it down to brand and CPU type and cores and RAM and all sorts of stuff, right? Ask around work as well. Hardware refreshes every 3, 5, 7 years. You might be able to pick up some stuff. They probably won't come with hard drives, but you still might get some CPU power and memory in the case and something to do something with, right? And then, of course, your friends might have something laying in their garage, and you can always go to the cloud. There are a bunch of servers in the cloud, right? Because basically it's just someone else's server. Everyone likes that line. All right, so some tips with that. Don't forget automation. If you're looking on Craigslist, there's, if that, then this, IFTTT.com. It's basically some layman programming. If this happens, then do this. So if these search terms pop up on Craigslist, send me an email with it, right? So you can actually set up a long stream of search terms matching Cisco, HP, Dell, server, rack, blah, 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 whatever you want to see, and you just get emails about it. You'll probably want to be really targeted with it though, or else you'll find some really weird things. Otherwise, be patient. Some of the good deals you might have to wait for. I really wanted a managed gigabit switch, and those can sometimes be a little expensive for all the ports that I wanted. I waited an extra little week. I found one for $100, and it was worth like $800. Ridiculous stuff on those Craigslist matches, right? So just a little patience sometimes goes a little long way. It's hard to do though, trust me. If you get into home labbing, your budget will be rough. Always do some research. There's a lot of hardware out there, there's a lot of gotchas, a little weird intricacies between the different vendors and between different things that you want to try to get. And otherwise, definitely be safe. This little rack here, I kept the picture on the pallet to give a size reference of how big that sucker is, instead of it hanging on the wall. I essentially put that on the wall myself with a little assistance, making it align right. That was not a smart idea. All right, some of these things can actually be really heavy, actually. 2U servers can easily hit 100 pounds. All right, don't be a hero. Stay safe, really. I'm hurting because of it. I wanted to bring a rack in here, but I'm hurting right now. And again, you may have more resources than you think. You could pop up VirtualBox on here, start playing around with some 512 meg VMs, do a little web testing, another gig here, there. You can do it, pretty easy. Next question. What is the worst part? All right, this guy right here, you had your hand first.
I don't like cabling my stuff.
No one likes it. Come on, get a drink, you're right. Also, retrofitting an already completed house with structured cabling is a narcissist's role as well. It's horrible. Try to find an unfinished house if you really want to get it right.
It's only bad if you want to keep your walls.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And ceilings. Yeah. And aren't afraid of spiders in your crawl space. Don't mind wearing a hazmat suit while you're down there and being all hot and stuff. I wouldn't do anything like that. I'm totally alright with spiders. All right, So, before you begin, there's some things to know. This is one of those pictures that I took, so there's no credits, right? This is in East Nashville. Okay, so this was before it got all prettified or whatever. Now, this was.
Back at the days in.
No, this is right. It's on Gallatin Road, and either way, we saw smoke coming out of it, and we went over there. It was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Like, I want to meet those kids. I want to go play with them. I don't want to go play with those kids. I did not say that on the camera. Okay, let me take that back. But whoever did that, they can have a drink on me. Something you'll want to know before you start home labbing is maybe a little power theory, right? Because you might end up flipping circuits faster than you realize, which also can have some other bad consequences. So you might want to learn some basic power theory. It's not that hard. Really, all you need to know is capacity, right? How many servers and Raspberry Pis can I run on this one plug? Your rooms are generally going to be a circuit a pop, running 15 to 20 amps each. Do a little math, figure out, okay, if I've got if I've got three 500-watt power supplies on a 15 amp circuit, I can run all three and nothing else, right? Ideally, you don't really want that because you want to only reach 80% of capacity, but I digress.
And keep in mind that if you've got anything like refrigerator, freezer, etc. on there, when those motors start up, they take extra power for the first few seconds.
Absolutely.
So do laser printers.
Also, a 500-watt power supply is 500 output, and they're not 100% efficient.
True. True. You'll want to read the little label on it. They're usually designated with, input watts at volts. You'll see, 580 watts at 120 volts, or 100 to 130. Sometimes they've got a range and they can deal with dirty power. But yeah, if you want to learn a little bit about that, go pick up a book. It's not that hard. They've got them at Home Depot. Great resources. You don't need to get up to any C level and figuring out all that stuff, but it's good to know. I'm glad a lot of you do too. Next question. All right, you got a little money. What do you do? All right. PowerEdge 2900 cluster, Raspberry Pi cluster, one little R720, or a tiny little NUC. Ooh, lots of hands. All right, this guy right here.
PowerEdge cluster. Need the power.
Pardon?
PowerEdge cluster. Come on.
All right, get a drink.
There you go.
I'll give you a drink.
Yeah.
Who else had their hand up? This one is actually like a multi-tiered. All right, this young fellow has had hand up for a while.
And tell core because you need it to run stuff.
Yeah, that's good. Good answer. I can't give you a drink though. Sorry about that. Yes, ma'am.
I go with a Raspberry Pi cluster because I'm in elementary,
Yeah,
K through 4, so
absolutely.
I want them to be able to see you can do some amazing things.
Absolutely. It's really easy to get started, and K through 4, that age range, if they break it, it's $35. You can just get another one pretty easily, right? Anyone else want to explain the other one?
Can you hook up the Pi Zeros with that? That's what I'm wondering, because they're like $5.
Yeah, okay, so actually there's a pretty cool, so there are these expansion boards or hats, they're called, for the Raspberry Pis, and one of them actually lets you attach 4 Raspberry Pi Zeros on top of it as a cluster.
Oh,
Yeah, so check that out. You actually could have a little cluster and say, okay, you 5 or you 4 connect to this little thing, and yeah, you can do some really cool stuff with it.
do I get to?
Yeah, go get a drink, go on, get a drink. Anyone want to explain the other one? No? All right, cool.
OTG that.
So they're all right. It depends on what you really want to do, right? It depends on what kind of workload you want to get into. I personally probably would not go with PowerEdge 2900 just because that series is pretty old and it sucks down power and produces a lot of heat and is loud. So you might find a lot of hardware for cheap. It might not always be that worth it, right? You might sometimes actually benefit from getting some of the newer bits, to be honest. So, again, you will probably want to do some research on this because not all hardware is created equally. If you get into embedded circuit design, not all chips are made the same either. I found that out the hard way. There are some Node MCU chips that let you do some embedded IoT work, and I got it from a couple different vendors, and they were different. They ran programs differently, even though they were around the same chipset. It was really weird. So again, do your research, and it was like one of those fine little print bits, right? That we can't support this or blah, blah, blah. Not all companies let you access their stuff after you have a service contract. That sucks, right? HPE, I'm talking to you. You can't get BIOS updates for their servers without an active service contract, and you can't buy a service contract on equipment that's out of service date. So how am I supposed to get those bits? I'm not going to trust the internet, right? Super micro, anyone?
Too soon.
Too soon, right? You had your hand up quick. What's up?
I was gonna say, wife approval factor.
Wife approval factor is absolutely right. Come on, get a drink if you like. So, again, with the Power Edge cluster, hey honey, look at this. I'm so happy. I brought home all these servers. And
Why
she's
does it
like,
make so much noise?
yeah, why am I so hot, right? You need to make sure you're aware of your surroundings. So sometimes it's actually beneficial to work in the cloud, right? A lot of these cloud providers give free services out. Azure has like $300 right now, same thing with Google. AWS has a free tier, so you can actually get started with some free cloud services. It can run away from you very quickly, though, right? My suggestion to you, if you do go about this path, learn some automation, right? Document it. Find out what you want to do. If it takes you longer than expected, or you have to stop yourself in the middle and go do something else, terminate it, or at least shut it down so you're not being charged. And in that way, whenever you want to go back and reattempt what you're doing, you have that documentation, you have some automation, and guess what? You've just probably learned that better by documenting and automating it as well. Training, very important. We are in the golden age of information. We are more connected. We have information available everywhere. There are lots of resources. The vMug subscription gives you access to all sorts of VMware bits. The Red Hat developer subscription is great. You can spin up a bunch of RHEL VMs that are supported and have all the developer functions. Enterprise grade software, right? Linux Academy is pretty great. I have a subscription myself there as well. I also suggest maybe some of the professional training. I swear by Red Hat's learning subscription. It is the best thing since sliced bread. And definitely invest in yourself. At the end of all this training, maybe go get a certification or spend a little extra on actual SATIN training. Because I guarantee you it's going to better you in the end. Not just personally, but also probably on the bottom line when it comes to career changes or advancements. All right, so a couple examples of what you can do, right? Just to kind of maybe get the juices flowing. Some things I've done. I've got this crazy home network core, and at a certain point I decided to connect my unified devices to an Amazon Echo. And so now I can shout at it, go, Alexa, restart network. And then it'll go offline and complain, and then restarts my network. It's pretty nice. I don't have to go downstairs in the basement. Can do a couple other cool little things. My network core also has something that a lot of home labbers have called Pi-hole. So what's pretty cool is whenever you hit my internal Wi-Fi, any DNS-based ads are blocked, right? Very cool stuff right there. Got a couple other things running on it. Again, it's a little Rube Goldbergian. Working on an offline Red Hat OpenShift deployment for disconnected federal systems. That's been really cool. So I've got my little lab that I've been moving hard drives across and scanning them and doing all this stuff there too. Kind of built that out. Built a couple of circuits because again, I did some automation for agriculture systems. And recently, I've actually got this thing is a little YubiKey, right? Something that everyone should have for themselves, for their own accounts. I've been, with that IDM lab, I've been using this to do some hardware identity access management as well. So that's pretty cool. You can kind of plug in, hit boop, and you log right into your Linux box. Other than that, I've also been reading and writing a lot more because again, documentation really helps and you get into a process of it and it's kind of rewarding. Been reading a lot of books lately because honestly, we're in front of our screen sometimes too much. That little tangible paper flip can be really satisfying at times, right? Been buying a lot of books. You should too. Some things you can do. Really depends on your imagination, all right? I hate to say it, but it's kind of like I get asked, I travel a lot, so I'm in and out of town, I'm riding through lifts, and sometimes they'll ask me what they do. They're like, oh, that's cool, I want to do that too. Where do I start? Do I go to one of those boot camps? I'm like, no. Do you like web design? She's like, I don't know. Then don't go to boot camp, right? A plumber probably doesn't want to be a web developer. can be horrible for them. They might be an all right network engineer though, right? Maybe infrastructure operator. Someone who's worked in retail might not be the greatest web developer, but they might have the structure and the order and management skills to go into database administration, right? So it depends on what your interests are at and what your strengths are at. By the way, another pop question. Anyone know what happens to DBAs after they're DBAs? Like, do they go to a farm upstate New York or something? Like, what happens to
It's a
them?
long story, but I can tell you later.
All right, cool. Answer a couple more. I think.
Well, in my case, I ended up shifting to purely development work.
Dev work is definitely a good way to go. All right, a couple more questions, right? So these are going to go pretty quick. We're going to wrap it all up. All right. You can get legit enterprise subscriptions for free. Quick draw. True. If you'd like a drink, come on and get it. Going to college is only good for finding dates, debt, and drug dealers. Definitely true.
Craigslist's got all of that.
Right? Yeah, you don't have to go about for that, technically. Who said true? All right, so you guys can get a drink. Anyone want to say false? All right, it's really false. Actually, there is something useful out of college. I got kicked out, so you know I can't really attest to it. But if you have a .edu address, there are a lot of free.
Yes.
Yes. MS. Yes. All right, so I'm pretty proud of that. You guys know about all the free goodies, right? Excellent. So yeah, you can get some really cool stuff for free. I've got some Windows Server licenses that are legit that activate that are great for free. Right? Great for your home lab. All right. What is the minimum amount of money you need? This guy, real quick.
There is no minimum. Just use what you have.
You are right. You're absolutely right. There's nothing. You can get started for free, 90 free. You can technically spin up a web server on your phone. I don't suggest it though.
Oh, false, big time.
False.
Obviously.
Absolutely. You can get some pretty cool things out of it, even a job. All right, so, promise we're gonna finish up here soon, right? So, to close things up, hey, we got some Catan players. I like it. All right, I like you guys. Oh wait, no, that was the wrong slide. Shoot. Yeah, so now we have got some Catan players. You guys weren't laughing at that. But so, yeah, now resources. Where do you go to learn? Where do you go to get? How do you move on from here? Reddit's definitely a good spot. Google, yeah, absolutely, just Google things. That's really most of my job. A lot of people wonder, like, what do I do? I'm like, I Google things. Something breaks, I Google what breaks.
Of course, you need to have enough knowledge to be able to figure out which of the device is good and which of the device isn't.
True, you need to know a little Google food. Google food. Google's definitely the universal source of truth. That's where a lot of places I start. I started using Reddit heavily because of my home lab, to be honest. I never really cared about it before because I thought it's like, like everyone says, it's the taint of the internet. Which really it is. But it has a lot of reward in it too. YouTube, great videos out there. Debatable on some. Social's also a good spot, because again, you can track things on hashtags. I met this guy who made a software-defined data center in a box that fits in a carry-on on Twitter. Amazing stuff, right? Wheel in a little box, say, yeah, I've got your data center right here, what do you want to do? In my line of work, that's powerful. User groups, conventions, networking, right? Adafruit, if you're going into embedded circuit design, they've got some great resources. That's where I started with this GPS and TP box. What I'm going to move on from here now that I've got it working is trying to do some interesting stuff to kind of fuzz it, right? So now I want to see if I can lie about where I'm at with that. I want to see if I can do what's going on in St. Petersburg, right? Definitely don't listen to me though. But if you do want to listen to me or contact me, there are a couple different ways to do so. I am not on most of the social things, but I do use Twitter. I have a GitHub account, and you can find my email address and subsequently my own website. Otherwise, I've got more drinks available. I've got my card as well, if you want to keep a tangible little bit of contact. If you want to come play with any of these, you're more than welcome to. Chit chat, questions, comments, concerns, qualms, queries, conundrums.
Swag.
Oh, shit.
Swag.
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 I was supposed to take points, wasn't I?
Yeah.
It's
All
your
right.
game show, man. You call
It is my game show. All right, so.
Awesome. Thunderdome.
How do we give these away? I want a contest like fisticuffs.
42.
42, that is a good answer. That is the meaning of life. You know what? Just because you said that, come on and get one. All right, I'll take titular quips and comments
Can I get
for
one of the cards
swag
also?
entry. So no, not that was
Good try. This isn't a
So
garage.
the recycling center really is one of the best places I've found, because I've gone to.
Recycling center? You ain't kidding.
It's best. So the Bridgestone Arena, I pulled their data center for their Jumbotron out of there. I had to put a 50 amp service in, but I got a whole bunch of P4000s and K4000s, I'm sorry. And it was just incredible. Yeah, now I have a hash packing factory. It's
I
great.
do a lot of hardware work, and I mean, there's a recycling center me and my buddy go to.
It's great.
I mean, 90% of what I get in reselling, I'm cautious I don't have a job that is my job. That's not paid for anything. I mean,
Yeah, I've got an X270 I got for $60 in here.
all right. You get a swag bag too for bringing up the recycling center. Come on if you want.
Yeah, thank you.
Recycling center is a great way to go. Totally forgot about that in my deck. Recycling center, something to, should I say this on camera? So, something about a recycling center is that if you go to the recycling center and it's the right one, they don't know too much about the tech, you usually can get away by paying for the metal, right? So, if something looks disabled from your expert opinion, you can usually pay the price of the weight of metal, which is pennies on the dollar.
And the hard drives.
Exactly.
oh Lord, don't even start on that. They don't like anything.
No, that stuff's scary.
It's terrifying.
That's so
Well,
scary.
Toys R Us closeout was real interesting because you could buy up their servers and they had the hard drives in them.
Did you hear about the,
That sounds like scooters.
there was the retailer up in Canada that had that happen recently as well?
Yep.
Yeah.
Whenever I was about 8, a bunch of Cricket stores
I don't
closed.
think so.
So I ended up getting a bunch of computers just from closed Cricket stores.
Yeah.
And then my school had a bunch of old servers that I ended up with. So I got now a bunch
Absolutely.
of Dell Power Edge.
Nice. You still running those power edges?
Well, I mean, my neighbors have to call and tell me to stop flying planes in the backyard.
Yeah. They're really loud.
I've got for the recycling center I just talked about. I've got multiple businesses from Wilson County. A whole business. There was a diabetes care club clinic. It's just there was customer information, social security numbers. Why do people not like their stuff?
Because they don't know.
It's just they.
Either don't know or you don't care.
So you talked about it could get you a job. So a few years ago, I picked up a few Z600s to do virtualization testing, just for my own knowledge for VMware. I ended up getting the foundations exam, and now I work in a data center lab. And because of how I told them what I did at home, they're like, all right, this guy we want in our lab, running our lab. So that's what I do now.
Yeah, exactly. You're not just gonna kind of ho-hum.
So my lab went from like $600 to $3 or $4 million.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just got a power server at one the other day. I got a Power 6 IBM.
Really?
Just the power supply alone is worth $2,000.
Yeah.
And I was just like, incredible. I was like, I don't know what to do with it, but I'm going to figure something out.
I got a bunch of old Cisco gear and I left this like massive chassis, this massive 6600 some chassis or whatever, in back because I filled up the car already, and I'm looking at it. It's like I don't even know what I'd use that for. It's only 100 megabit. It's like fast Ethernet. I wouldn't even really use it, but I want it, right?
There should be a swag for those who got a question right but can't drink.
I like your idea. You know what? You don't ask, you don't ever find out if you get it or not. So how about that? I like that idea. You get a little bag because you can drink. This guy's got ideas. You guys should follow him.
I was part of a hackerspace for a while here in Nashville. At one point, we were donated a. You'll take care of it. UPS that had come out of a mainframe center. We had to rent a truck.
10 kVA.
Oh yeah, 3-phase, like pulling it. Oh, that's beautiful. That's when you really need to know how to run some power. I saw this one guy, I met this one guy who used to work on airplanes, massive nuclear-powered airplanes, and he, in his garage, had 3-phase power. On his garage door, it was like, warnings, warnings, warnings. This guy was really crucial. But either way, I'm gonna wrap up. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all for your consideration and attendance.